So because we had a lot of issues unrelated to my operating system, I'm going to try and just record videos for this week. I think it'll be nicer if we can continue to use Hangouts for presentations in the future, but for today, just to avoid wasting more time, I'll just try and record this. I may need to do it in a couple different recordings, but this may just be easier. So I'm going to try and pick up where I left. I don't know exactly where I was, but I'll just open up the code and we'll just get right into products.js. I'm just going to move my screen over slightly. There we go. So, like I was mentioning, we have our main document.ready function. This is just a fare. It ends right here. But basically, that just gets everything initialized so that it's easy, or it starts, making the function calls and getting the products displayed, or getting the prices from the cart and whatnot. Then we have all our different functions below, and there's quite a few in this file, and there's also more functionality in other files, and I may be able to walk through some of those in a little bit. But just to kind of walk through some of these. So the first function we have here is get all products, and if we look at this, it's doing a fairly simple call. We have a function in our tools.js file called read cookie, and all we need to do is pass in cookie name. Now this is an example of poor programming. I got lazy while doing this, and the cookie name is literally cookie name, and it is a global variable. So very nasty, but in the rush of getting things done, that's how it was left. Do a check here, and again, this is an early function that I wrote, so this isn't great. A better way to do this potentially would just be to check the type of the products variable and make sure that it's not set to undefined, and then check that it's not empty. But here we're not doing that in a great way. But if it's not set, then we'll return false. Otherwise, all we're doing here is returning a parse of the products cookie that we've added for our user. JSON.parse, just to clarify, is it's native to most newer browsers. It's in the ECMAScript documentation, so it should be Chrome and Firefox latest versions will be able to use that. But I did have to add in tools.js this function, the object, the JSON object, and the parse method for IE6 and IE7, and even maybe IE8 that couldn't parse JSON properly. So if we call this get all products, we can set a variable to be equal the value of this, and it'll return just an object with all our products that we can loop through. We have get product price, and like we mentioned earlier, product pricing for this project is based on location and by product code. So in this case, we pass in the location title, and then we have some other functionality in here, but we can get the location. We have another function called get location from cookie, and we just have to pass in the location title, so in this case we get that from here. And then we can loop through our product prices for this particular location. So our location object has a variable product underscore prices, and it's actually an array that we can loop through, and so we just check and get the right product code from up here and return the value for product price. And again, we just check that product price is set, and then we can return that price, or we'll return false. So this is probably actually a later function that I wrote while working on this project, so we're using type of properly here to make sure that it's just set and not null or undefined. We have an example of a set function for setting the product links. Not exactly sure what this function does off the top of my head, but it looks like for each of the add links on a page, it's going to, okay, so basically it will eventually update the link so that when we click the add button, that add button will add the correct product to our cart. So this is just a set where we're setting links on our page. Set functions can also be used for data. So if we want to update our data, we could use like set product price and change the product price, and we'd probably pass in the same things where we pass in location, title, product code, so that we can get that particular variable inside the object, and then we would just simply change the value of that variable. One thing I'll just mention, and I noticed it up here, is I have this delete product underscore price. And this is an example of me not understanding the name space well enough in JavaScript when I started this project. So product underscore price is just defined as a global, and I define it multiple times throughout the code. And sometimes product underscore price will refer to one particular product, and other times I'll call it on a different product code, and I was getting issues where getting into this function, I didn't know why product underscore price was set. Sometimes it would just all of a sudden be equal to $1,000, and I didn't know why I was getting issues. So to get around that, I would delete this product underscore price variable. This was a workaround that I just did to solve the problem at the time. The better way to do it would be to use a local namespace, like a local variable, var product underscore price equals blah blah blah. And this is what we talked about earlier with namespace, with variables being global or local. And in most cases, we're going to want our variables to be local. And we'll look at another example in code later where global variables do work. But this delete product underscore price is a result of me not understanding the namespace properly. So if we just look down here, we can find a few other functions. Like I mentioned earlier, we want to keep functions small, so each of these functions have been short. Add location, on the other hand, is a very long function, and it could probably be made shorter, but there's just a lot of functionality that's being done here to find the correct area in the object. So we pass in a province, region, directory coverage, whether or not it's a primary. So we have cases where pricing is affected on whether it's your primary location or whether it's a secondary location. We have to pass in whether it's mapped or not. And then children is a Boolean that we can pass in. And basically what we can do with that is, if we wanted to add all locations in the Fraser Valley, we would set children to yes, and that would just include all of the locations of the Fraser Valley when doing product price calculations, and also in the cart. So we do this is just some functionality to get the location, and basically all of this functionality is just needed to properly add location to our cookies. And so at the end here, basically the result of this function is that we create a cookie called locations, and inside of it is our stringified location underscore array, and so all our locations. We'll talk about stringifying in a little bit when we look at JSON, maybe in the next video. And then we can basically the function will just return whether it was successful or not. And this is actually this is returning whether our locations were changed or whether our location was added. So if we want to delete or not delete, but we can change whether our location is primary or not using that. Likewise, we have a remove location, so we can just pass in the location title and remove it. And we have different functionality pieces for different functionality inside the cart. This one is specifically to remove locations from products. This is another good example of things gone a little bit mistray. I have a lot of functions in my code here that are doing relatively similar things. But because I did not have a full plan of how this would be built right from the beginning, I often would just write a function to do what I needed it to do at the time. And if I had taken more time at the beginning of the project to plan it out, it may have turned out a bit better. But we have more get functions to get the primary location, get location. So this isn't necessarily primary, but get primary location could probably be replaced by get location and just pass in a variable or an argument to get the primary, and the functionality could have been reduced and simplified. Similarly, to get a location from cookie, this again is very similar to get location and probably could have been simplified by just using one function instead of multiple. Then we have some other display functions. So here we're going to display product locations. This is basically a set product locations, and I probably should have called it set product locations. And we have a bunch of other functionality in here. But basically, the nice thing about this is now if we look back at our onReady function, we can see things like set location. So instead of having to write out the code for set location many times, we can just call this function, and it's simple. Likewise, we can add click handlers to certain links. So if I remove that product, basically the whole all this is doing is just removing the location from products. There's a few other things that need to happen, just display wise, or getting the right variable names or that sort of thing. But all the functionality can happen from within this one function instead of in our event handler. It just keeps everything a lot simpler. So that is the code example from Campages. I'd be happy to walk through some more with other people if you're interested, but that kind of shows how Campages is set up. And we'll get back into the document in another video, and I'll walk through another example then.